Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Lyons, and I'm the deputy editor of the Sunday Business Post, and I'm joined here on stage by Ronan Perceval, who is the founder of Phorest, which is the biggest provider of salon software in Ireland and Britain. We're going to be taking questions on Slido a little later on, but just to kick things off, we're going to talk about Ronan's guide to, and it's a no bullshit guide, to achieving a $45,000 LTV from your customer while keeping a sub 5% churn. And it's a company that is targeted at the SMB space. But before we get into that, Ronan, maybe we could take a step back and you could tell me a little bit about Phorest, the Phorest story, about why you decided to set the company up, and how you built the company since.
Yeah. So I started when I was in college here in Dublin. I started a startup with a couple of guys, Dylan Collins and Sean Blanchfield, called Demonware, and I actually left Demonware fairly early on to start Phorest, and that the history of that is actually kind of why we're in the SMB space, because Demonware provided middleware to computer game companies like Activision and EA and stuff like that, and I really wanted to provide software to smaller companies where I'd actually meet or know the people who'd benefit from it. And the reason behind that was my father had a small business himself selling foods in the west of Ireland, so that was kind of what I was more interested in helping. And so that's where Phorest started once I left Demonware. And our very first product was a appointment software that sent appointment reminders by text message, and it would cut down on no-shows, and it would work for any small business. So, like a restaurant or a dentist or a doctor. And we thought this was a fantastic idea because there's millions of these businesses, and we thought the opportunity was huge. But what turned out was that we never got any traction with any of them because we were trying to spread ourselves too thin. So we were doing, like we had a couple of restaurants, we had a dentist, we had a doctor, we had a salon, and but like a doctor doesn't recommend software to a dentist, and a dentist doesn't recommend software to a cherry picker company. So we weren't getting anywhere, and we knew we had to focus on one of these sectors. And what happened was I was going to go and work in a dentist. And I had that job lined up, and because also we weren't making very much money, so we needed a job anyway. So I was trying to combine, two birds and all that. Yeah. But basically, so we went, and I had to wait 2 months for this job in the dentist. So in the meantime, I went to work in a salon, and that's how it started. It was purely but fluky that we went there. I'd never been in a salon before in my life, and so this is about 11 years ago now. And I worked reception for this lady called Tina, who had a salon down the IFSC. And it was an amazing experience. It's very hard to explain to anyone who hasn't worked in that industry, but it's very unlike any other industry I'd ever experienced before. There's this amazing thing about working in a salon, that people come into the salon every day really looking forward to coming into the business. Yeah. And then they leave and they go and get their hair done. And when they come back to the desk, they're feeling even more amazing than they were when they walked in. And it's very hard not to feed off that energy when it's happening every 10 minutes. So there's this great environment in there, and I'd never experienced it before, and I sort of fell in love with it, and we just stayed in that place. And one of the things that happened was, because we were working the reception and we were working the software, we quickly figured out there was other problems that we could solve for Tina, who was the salon owner. And we were able to implement them, and that's where the product went from just being a generic appointment software to being a specific salon software.
And that was 11 years ago, Ronan. Can you tell us about how big the company is today, and give us a sense of the scale of it?
So we were bootstrapped for about 7 years, and so we built up quite slowly. But we'll do about 10 million euros in revenue this year, about 120 staff. We're primarily in the UK and Ireland, but we now have operations in Germany, Finland, and in the US.
And that number, $45,000 lifetime value from small and medium enterprise. Like how do you get towards that number? And what are the tips you give from your experience with Phorest?
So just, it's not something that like happens overnight for sure in SMB. I think the couple of things that are kind of unique to SMB is that your customers, and in our experience salons, but customers generally don't want to pay a lot of money for a service, but they are willing to pay for value that they get. So in our case, the first part of the 45,000 LTV is how much revenue we generate from a salon, and less than half of that, like a good bit less than half of that, is actual contracted SaaS subscriptions.
Yeah.
The rest is transactional revenue of some description. So it could be like them sending text message appointment reminders or promotions, payments, online bookings, a whole host of things. And it's really important in SMB that you try and keep the fixed fee as low as possible, so to make customer or make salons or small businesses feel comfortable signing up, but you have to have all those extra things if you're to make it pay. Because if you're just fixed on the subscription, it'll be very hard to get the returns, or your LTV CAC ratio just won't work out. The second part of the 45,000 LTV is the lifetime value, and you've got to have a low churn. As low churn as possible in SMB. So the lower your churn, the longer your customer pays you, and therefore the higher they pay you. And ours is less than 5%, and that's taken us many years to get there. We only hit 5% about 2.5 years ago, and we've kept it at that level since. But it's very hard in the SMB space to have such a low churn because they go out of business all the time. I mean, I was over in the scale stage there earlier, and someone said, they were talking about restaurants, and the average restaurant in the US only stays in business for 4 years. Whereas based on a 5% churn rate, we get 14 years, out of a salon. So, so that's kind of.
And what's your communication strategy with SMBs? Like when you've got these thousands of customers scattered all over the place in big cities, but also lots of small towns. Like, how do you stay in touch with them?
We do a lot of content, and the content is there for lead generation as well, but primarily I suppose it's for communicating and building up that relationship with the salons. So we have, for example, a blog which is very big in the salon space. It's blog.phorest.com, and it's got about 35,000 visitors a month, purely salon owners, that is, right? So that's quite a lot. And we have 3 people that work on that full time, producing content, so podcasts, blog posts, video, everything like that. Social media stuff, like Facebook Lives, all that kind of stuff. So we're constantly producing really quality content in that area, and the content is all about helping the salon grow their business. So they have that relationship with us where we're not telling them about how great our software is. It's all about, how do you get your clients back more often? How can you get your clients spending more? How can you do this in the salon to get your staff more motivated, all that kind of stuff.
And when you're trying to win a customer, win an SMB, like what advice would you give about getting those new customers on board?
Well, in the salon space anyway, it's quite it takes quite a long time to build up a reputation with them. It's a very slow moving industry, I would say, which has got positives and negatives. Like the positives are, because it's slow moving, once you get those clients and you're doing a good job, they will stay with you for a long, long time. The negatives are it can take a while to scale up. So I think the key is just we're building that relationship with them from day one with all that, with the content, with the blog and the podcast and all that kind of thing. We're building that relationship from day one, and it can maybe take them 3 or 4 or 5 years before they actually come in and become a client.
And when you're in Ireland and you're in Britain and you're looking at other markets, like when you're trying to build your team to go into a new market, what type of people are you looking for, and like what's your hiring strategy?
So we're getting better at it as time goes on. I think we already have, like you're saying, like product and all that kind of thing. So when you're looking at a new market, it's like how quickly can we get from 0 salons to 100 salons, and there's 2 hires that are key to doing that, and they are having an all-round guy who's a good salesperson, but is also an all-rounder who can do maybe train people up and kind of get the thing off the ground. So like a founder kind of person, And then the most important hire beside that person is a telesales person, like a cold caller who's going to ring those initial 100 salons and get the all-rounder guy in there to do demos to build up your reputation from zero. And then once that's going, and once you have about 100 salons, like 100 salons might be 20,000 a month in ARR for us, or MRR for us, you've got a business and you can use that revenue then to sort of hire out the team, whether it's in terms of onboarding and support and operations, or and then in terms of sales and marketing. So adding a marketing person to really start building out all that content for that territory.
And Ronan, you were saying there, that you've taken in outside money as well as bootstrapping through profits and cash flow. When do you think is the right time to take in external funding? And do you need to do things differently if you're in the SMB space?
Yeah, look, I'm going to presume a lot of the SMB space are similar to the salon, because I know people who say run SaaS businesses now in a lot of those verticals. But yeah, I think it can be a little different with SMB, particularly the way we do it. The market is very there's not a huge amount of word of mouth in the salon industry, so we don't tend to get. I'll come back to this will make sense in a sec. Like, there's not a huge amount of salon owners recommending it to other salon owners. It tends to be somebody working in a salon that has Phorest, then leaves to open up a salon on their own, and then they take Phorest with them. And that's kind of the sort of the natural kind of virality that is in the industry. So it's a lot slower than, say, another sector where everyone would recommend to each other. Do you know what I mean? So for that reason, it's a bit more of a longer play.
So you don't see that hockey stick?
It's more, and certainly in our case, it's just been slowly, steadily getting faster over time as we have more people reading our blog, more customers, more whatever. It's slowly building up, and so for that reason, we took on funding about 7 years in, and it kind of turbocharged us at that point. So I think it depends on your business. Do you know what I mean? Like we were, I suppose, lucky in one way that we were able to get clients straight away paying for it. And some companies need funding at the start to build out the product or whatever. So it really depends on your own experience. But for us, I think doing it bootstrapped has been massively beneficial.
And we're going to take a couple of questions from the floor now, Ronan, if you don't mind. So, we'll take that top question first, which is just about the 5% churn rate.
Yeah.
Is that annual or monthly?
It's annual. So our monthly churn is sub 0.5%. Yeah, and that's, like I will say myself, that is really good in the SMB space, in terms of like the amount of people that would go out of business. But it's taken us a long time to get there. And I think typical churn rates in SMB starting out can be anywhere from 1 to 3% per month, which is 10 to 30% per year. Can be more typical when you're starting out.
So you've seen that number fall to 5% as the product's gotten better?
Yeah, it's just always falling down. As you're adding more services, more value, better service, the product gets more ingrained, it goes lower.
And this next question is about average monthly income per customer. Can you give a sense of what that number might be?
Yeah, we have it kind of publicly in our own business. It's €207 per month per salon at the moment. So.
And if you see the next question, they're talking about salons that and SMBs in general, they can be quite tech adverse, who mightn't be using the internet too much. And they're asking about acquiring new customers and cold calling that doesn't scale. I mean, would you have any additional advice to give there?
Yeah, I guess cold calling has worked amazingly well for us at the start in a territory, because you don't have any presence or anything like that. So it works really well, but it's true, it obviously doesn't scale, but then it doesn't need to, because once you start building a brand and a reputation, you've clients out there, so you're getting some sort of word of mouth. I know it's not as much as it might be in other sectors, but you're getting that. When people have been reading your blog for a couple of years, they've seen you around, they've seen you at trade shows maybe, they might have even had a demo of you, they've been on your website. You're getting inbound leads then from lots of different sources. And so cold calling can then shrink down in terms of how much of your sales come from that. But at the same time, I think cold calling is very much dissed or dismissed by a lot of people. And all I can say is it's hard to do it, but it was worth it for us, for sure. Like for a couple of years at the start in Ireland, it was all cold calling, and it worked really well. So I don't think it should, I don't think people should be afraid of it. Do you know what I mean?
Do you closely coach people when they're calling up? Like, would they have a whole play sheet around what to say and how to respond?
Yeah, like I would have even done it myself right at the very start, right? So, but yeah, like it's all, like the guys, they've honed that over many years, do you know what I mean? But like a lot of salons, what we're doing is we want to have a chat with the salon owner on the phone, and we can possibly help her with some stuff around growing her business. Do you know, that's really what the cold call is about. So it's quite friendly. Even on the phone, we might be able to give them some tips or some ideas and things like that. So it doesn't have to be seen like, I think a lot of people think cold calling, it's like, someone is hounding you all the time, and it doesn't have to be like that. And I'd really recommend it, particularly in a space where you've got to sell, like in an SMB space where you've got to go out and win the customers directly.
And another question from the floor, this time from Jess. How did you build up marketing and sales, and what order did you put them in terms of hiring?
So it worked out well, like I was saying there, that the cold calling and telesales at the start was a much faster way to get traction in the market when you don't have any reputation. But you do want to be doing, content and marketing and stuff like that from fairly early on. It's just going to take you longer for that to really start to produce results for you. Like we've people on our blog that 5 years later before they buy the product, you know what I mean? So they've been interacting with us for years before they actually buy. So at the start, you can't wait 5 years to make a sale, right? So you need to get out there and win those sales straight away. So sales for us has always been first, but then followed very closely by marketing.
And can you tell us more about the impact content has had on activation and on onboarding? Given all of the content you are producing. Yeah,
it's a good question. So that's probably one of our biggest metrics in Phorest is like what we call go live. So after somebody signs up, do they go live? If the salon goes live, they almost definitely go on for a couple of years. Do you know what I mean? So it's activation is obviously another way of saying it. But for us, we found that we just need to go out to the salon and get them to go live. That like when we faff around a lot with trying to coach them to go live and do all this kind of stuff, it just doesn't happen as much as if you go out to the salon, they go live. And if you're going to get an LTV of 14 years or 45,000, then it's worth your while getting out to the salon for a few hours and making sure they go live. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the other great thing about that is, and people might go, that's crazy, it won't scale, but it does actually scale if you're building up your monthly revenues beyond the core subscription. Do you know what I mean? If you're just charging 50 quid a month, no, you can't do that. But if you can get it over 200, up to 300, then you can.
Yeah.
So that's something that we've experienced.
And we've got a lot of people with checkbooks, or certainly some people with checkbooks here. Like this next question about Series A funding. If you took in a big round today, what areas would you invest in if you wanted to grow at a big level?
I'm not sure we would, but if we did, I'd say that we'd just do more territories faster, I think, if that makes sense. Like we just launch in more territories because it takes a while for a territory to really start making money. So you just want to get in to as many as you can. You're going to make a loss in those initially, and then once they start creating 20, 30, 40 grand MRR each, that's self-fulfilling from that point on.
Yeah. And that next question, is about customers onboarding. Is it 100% self-service, like you seem to be saying? Like there's an element.
No, it's the opposite. Yeah, it's the opposite. We're pretty much 100%. We
talk them through it.
We onboard them, and that's a massive part of, I think, of our value proposition. Because what we've noticed is that we've always had competition that do self-serve in our sector, like since we started. But their average bill is way less than ours. Do you know what I mean? So they're kind of caught in a well, I've forgotten the word, but like they're caught in a thing where they can't, because their average bill is so much less, they're never going to be able to do that. But because we go out and we make them go live, we have less churn, which means we make more money. But also, because we're out there, we have this interaction that we have with the salon, which creates a bit of a relationship from day one, which means that they're more open to us doing the value-added transactions and the value-added services later, which means that our average bill is higher. Do you know what I mean? And it way more than pays for itself. Do you know what I mean? So, you can't argue with it, like, from that point of view,
And I think we've just got time for one more question, Ronan. This is from Rich, and he's talking about when building a new region. Do you send a star employee over, or do you hire someone there? What would you do ideally, and what did you do when you went into the UK for the first time?
Well, we're definitely looking. It depends on the language. If it's an English-speaking territory, obviously that's one thing. So like we haven't launched in Australia yet, but we're looking at that, and we'd probably like to send 1 to 2 people from Phorest out there for a couple of years, and that would make a lot of sense because they know the culture and they know what they're doing. And Australia obviously would be an easy place to go from that point of view. But if it's somewhere like Germany or Finland, which are 2 territories we're in, and we're looking at France and a few other places, we have to hire over there or find an agent or a partner or something to do that part.
Well, there's lots of interesting challenges ahead. Ronan Perceval of Phorest, thanks for joining us on stage.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Please.